Hello, this is Biotech 210, Business and Regulatory. And today is, I don't know if we'll have anyone joining us, but basically what we're going to be doing is a little bit of a podcast. And I have for you kind of an interesting thing, an interesting take on business. We're going to wait about another minute. And typically what we'll do is we'll start these things at about 8:10 a.m. So students in the class, Julio, Jonathan, and Mayor Cruz. Whatever time it is, I hope you're having a good time, and I hope it's going pretty well. I am here in my mad scientist laboratory. As you can see in back of me, I have some materials that we will be making. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about biotech business, and specifically what I want to talk about. And I know this is kind of backwards, but Gordon Binder, who's one of the first CEOs, I think the second CEO of Amgen, which is a big biotech company, wrote this book on science lessons. And so the title is What the Business of Biotech Taught Me About Management. And for me, science books on business are a little bit different than kind of books on science and stuff like this. And this goes into a little bit of kind of how he feels. This is at the San Mateo Public Library, and you can kind of check this out. I'll be returning it pretty soon. But what I wanted to do is to talk a little bit about this. And I chose a chapter in there. I believe it's chapter number 5. And basically what they're looking at in this chapter number 3, the business of science meets the science of business. What I wanted to do is talk a little bit about Amgen and kind of what they do and how it kind of regulates to stuff. And so again, just like our Yali book has, the business of science is really kind of interwoven with regulation, with business practices, and first and foremost, basically the business that goes in there, because that is what allows us to have our product. So I will be doing a talk on that particular one, and then at the very end, I'll be kind of asking a little bit for your kind of opinions and that. And what I want you to do is to kind of go on and leave me a voice, just like I'm giving you this podcast here. So what I want you to do is to talk a little bit about these things that I introduced. Okay, and that will be it. You have a lot of other things, making a logo and other things that you need to do for this week. So I hope you're able to do that. So with that, what I will do is share my screen. I will go back. So actually how you find this is that if we go back home, so where would this be? If we go back home, if we go down to week 3, if we go on to week 3, in week 3, again, previously I had a slide deck for you to look at. So this is the Thursday drop. I'm going to call these things drop. And so we don't have to meet. We're not necessarily meeting at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop some information for you guys basically on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And you'll have about a week to kind of look at them and do those particular materials. Again, I put the date here. I'm not making a link in there, but you could go to the Zoom and you can get the Zoom recording on this. Hey, Jonathan. So Jonathan's coming in, and so we can get his kind of take on this as well. We're going to let him go in. Hey, Jonathan, how are you doing?
Good morning. Good. Dr. Cap. Sorry, I'm late.
No, this is it's a thoroughly online class, so you don't necessarily have to be here. And I'm sorry I had to make the changes and stuff like that. So, so what I'm sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
I remember that today that we start at 8:10, right?
Yes, at 8:10. So you're like 2 minutes late. That's okay.
Okay.
All right, Jonathan, it's good to see you.
Oh.
So we may have a number of people here, we may not. And so, Jonathan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a lecture today. I have a slide deck and lecture. So how you can see the slide deck is if you go to the home on the page, This is week 3, and so I will have the materials for week 3 are in here. And so on Tuesday, we had that Zoom meeting. You can look at that deck, and then we had a whole bunch of things. I want you to do a logo, and there's a whole bunch of other things that you want to do. On Thursday, and I'm calling it a drop, I'm going to be presenting some information. You don't necessarily have to be here if you don't want to. So I published up a slide deck on it, and I will be kind of going through that slide deck and talking about it. And then at the end of this, I have something for you to fill out for the assignment. So I want to have your verbal feedback on this particular one. But what I was going to do is I was just going to go through the slide deck. I'm kind of treating it like a podcast almost, presenting a show. But you're my live audience. So if you have a question, please pop up.
Okay. I have one question because I just check all your Zoom recording. They all need the codes.
Okay. I'll show you how to get the code on that one in a second. Actually, why don't we do that right now? We could go on and you can get the code. So if you go, if you go to Zoom, I'm recording this, right? And it says you can look at it under previous meetings, or you can look under cloud recordings, right? And so if you click on previous meeting, this will give you February 2nd. Yeah, Tuesday, February 2nd. If you click on this meeting, okay, I'm going to go back. It may be a little bit weird because I'm doing this because I'm actually giving a meeting right now. So,
I see.
So let's go back to cloud recordings. If you go back to cloud recordings, here's the one on. So Zoom records a bunch of files and stuff on here that they have. And so if you go back to this file recording, if you click on this, this gives you all of these files here. And so I'm going to show you this in a second. So the two things that you really want is this one and this one. And so if you click on this one, it says copy the passcode. So the passcode is already copied to the clipboard. So that one, that the upper left-hand side copies it. And then if you click on the recording, you're going to need to sign in using your email address, but then you have the password there, and that should get you in automatically.
Oh, I see. I see. I never know that before.
Yeah, you know, it's something odd, but yeah. So my other class showed me that. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. All right. So yes, you can get in and look at those, and anyone who kind of records the materials. What I like about using the Zoom to record the materials is it gives you the transcripts. So you can go through and you can look for things, look using the transcript and stuff like that. And it's very handy. And
awesome.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go back home. And I'm gonna do a little bit of a lecture today. And this is a little bit more in business. So this class is kind of a combination of kind of business things and science things. And we're definitely going through the Yali book and on that. And so here's my slide deck. I'm going to click on the slide deck. All right. And again, so we're kind of going over this book. It's at the library. If you want to be able to see that book, here, let me do. So this book is at our local library, and I don't ask you to read it, because there's a lot of this stuff that's out there. And so what I did is I took a chapter of there, and I'm going to kind of go over this book and talk a little bit about that book. And so that should take us roughly about a half hour to do. And I have my slide deck there, and so I'm going to present. So again, if you have any questions or anything else as we're doing that, just talk and say it. And so it's meant, so I'm kind of treating this a little bit as kind of like a podcast, and you are my audience for the podcast.
Okay.
And so I'm going to put it on here. And so where I'm going is I'm covering in this, I'm covering kind of a lesson from what it says here, science lessons that the business of biotech taught me about management. And this is done by a guy by the name of Gordon Binder. And he was the CEO of Amgen when they went out for their IPO, their initial stock offering. And and he kind of built it into $1 billion a year customer, $1 billion a year company. And so I took a chapter out of there that I liked. The business of science meets the science of business. And that's a lot of kind of what we're doing in this class is we're kind of actually we're looking at biotech, but we're looking at business, and we're trying to show what we know about biotech, but then we're going to learn a little bit about business. And so again, the guy who did this is a guy by the name of Gordon Binder. I don't know if you know Amgen. They're a company.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they're headquartered in Thousand Oaks, California, which is Southern California. Their capital for, I believe, their sales for 2019 was 23 billion. And again, this is one of the largest independent biotech companies. And so Genentech has Roche that kind of bought it out, but I believe Amgen is still independent. In 2018, the company's largest selling product lines were Nesula, an immunostimulator. And so what they look a lot is kind of at these hormones and stuff like that that stimulate cell production in kind of us human beings and animals. And so we're talking business regulation in science. And that's kind of what we cover in this class. So we want to talk about that. And if you think about this, a lot of these companies, Genentech and Biogen Idec, came about in the 1980s. Do you remember your biotech history? What was going on in early 1980s?
It's 1980. Oh, it's Genentech founded in 1980s.
Yeah, 1980s. But, a lot of it was technology. So what I say here, in the 1980s, discover of molecular cloning. And so taking a gene from one animal and putting it in E. coli or putting it in another animal, right? So before this, we didn't know anything how to do that. And this is a very powerful technology. And the thought was that a number, and actually this is a lot of business savvy types. We biologists have been trying to do this for a while, but the business side said, hey, we can do this. And if we look at it at YALI this week in YALI, what we were talking about mainly was basically this, the ability, when you have a company, you're going to look at tools and techniques. So if you focus in on tools and techniques, you will have something. So a lot of these early companies focused in on those tools and techniques. But at this time, it was really hard to clone things. It's a lot easier to clone things now. While they had the technique, it wasn't very good yet. It was difficult, it was hard, and actually even some people thought it was unsafe. And so there were some rules and regulations that were going on, and so you had to treat things and have them in under containment, like a BSL-3 lab, in order to do any of this material. So Amgen was incorporated roughly on April 8th, 1980. It was the brainchild of venture capitalist William K. Bowles and his associates. They started out with a staff of 3, and the company occupies a kind of a shared building that they bought out now as number 1. George Rothman was named the first CEO, and he was a scientist but kind of more of a businessman. And so when Amgen kind of first started, they wanted to capitalize on this cloning technique, but they didn't have a product yet. So nothing in May, they didn't know what it was. So they kind of had like a 4-pronged approach that I'll talk about. And so what they had was a tool, right? Cloning. Cloning is a tool, and then cloning is a technique. But, what can we clone? What can we make in order to make some money? And so in the first 3 years of the company, right? So we're talking about 1980 to 83. They basically were trying to clone anything they can, and they were trying to look at any business possibility that they can. And so they were looking at ways to genetically engineered microorganisms to extract oil from shale. They were looking at hormones to give chickens to make them bigger. And this is kind of, if you look at it now, our chickens are a lot different now than they were in the 1950s. And some of that's breeding, some of that's kind of hormone and feed additives and stuff like that. Making specialty chemicals, right? And so again, we're looking at chemicals that are petrochemicals. Can we make them safer? Can we make them easier using biological systems? They were the first to produce indigo, which is the blue dye that you have in your blue jeans from E. coli. And another thing that they were looking at is treating and curing diseases in animals or in human beings. Right. And so what you tend to see in diseases, in the diseases, if you know the cause of disease, so if somebody is missing X, and if you can manufacture X and give it to them, and that X satisfies that deficiency, then basically you have a drug. But at this day and age, they didn't know what to do. So they were kind of doing a little bit of everything. So you had this company that was basically a bunch of scientists doing kind of basic research. And for the most part at Amgen, their first hires were kind of all scientists. Gordon Binder was called in about 1983. So Gordon Binder is the author of the book. And basically, he shepherded Amgen into its IPO, and then also the name change as well. And so the American, so Amgen was a little bit was named kind of something else before. I kind of don't remember what it is. And one of the products that they were thinking about producing was a hormone called erythropoietin, which was kind of helpful in a subset of patients. And what erythropoietin does is it increases the red blood cell production in human beings. So it's a hormone. It causes the cells within the bone marrow to start producing it. And so, again, they thought that if erythropoietin could be cloned, then they can produce it and then they can sell it as a drug. Again, when they were doing this in the 1980s, it was really easy. Sequencing a gene or even discovering a gene would get you a PhD, or possibly here would give you a blockbuster tech. And so what today seems very easy when we're thinking about synthetic biology and kind of all this stuff, in the 1980s, that was kind of pretty hard. And so, again, during its first 7 years, for the most part, Amgen was staffed exclusively by scientists. So you have this kind of crazy scientific bunch here. And then basically what they were doing is they had cloning, but they were looking for a product. And so what can they do? And one of the things that they hit at was to go on to the human therapeutics. So I'm going to go on here. Again, we may ask on the business side, why is Amgen in Thousand Oaks? And so when they first developed Amgen, is they want to be in a place where scientists want to be, right? And so if you're out in the middle of nowhere and no one wants to be there, you're going to have to pay a lot of money to have somebody go in there. And so Thousand Oaks in Southern California is a kind of a great place to live. It's an interesting place to live, but also it's really close to some large institutions, and we tend to see that a lot. And so a lot of our hubs for biotechnology, again, here in the Bay Area, we have a hub because we have these kind of academic institutions that are there. And so, again, Thousand Oaks is kind of in between the University of California in Los Angeles, the University of California at Santa Barbara, and the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. And so there was kind of lots of scientists there. There was lots of scientists who went to school there, who liked it there, who kind of didn't necessarily want to go away, and that's where they wanted to be. So that's one of the reasons why we do see it in Thousand Oaks. Okay. So at this time, so about 1983, they are, they're just about to clone their first gene, the erythropoietin, first hormone that they can get, and so they're developing into a company. And so what happens at this time? So in the early 90s, they had a sales manager who was helping them do this, and basically he dies of a heart attack. His assistant has a heart attack and almost dies. And so you have this kind of budding company, and you don't have somebody who kind of knows the business who can do that. And so, again, at this time, Gordon Binder, who wrote the book, was in charge, and he got a guy. So what he wanted to do is he wanted to hire internally. And so he got a guy by the name of Dennis Fenton. And this is the picture of Dennis Fenton kind of right here. He was the vice president of operations in charge of basically process development in manufacturing facilities. And so he was doing is you're manufacturing a project, and he was responsible for the infrastructure for that, for how they do that, and for how they figure out, this is process of how do we figure out how to get as much drug as possible using as little materials as possible and being safe and everything else like this. This guy was a science PhD molecular biologist. He had no thoughts, no ideas, no inclination to go into sales and marketing. And again, Gordon Binder kind of saw something in him that he believed would be interesting. And so what he needed to do is to convince Dennis that he should take over the marketing. And so the idea of this was, the marketing department was actually running very good, and the marketing department was doing good things, the person who left, but it wasn't well organized. And what he wanted to do is to have somebody come in and have everyone, as he says it, everyone's singing from the same page. And so there's ideas that there are parts of the marketing department that were doing little things different than other people. He needed to promote, to transfer some people, to make some changes. He needed to establish more internal structure and devise plans and kind of teach people kind of how to follow them. And that's one of the things. So if you come in and you get a plan, but people don't follow the plan, then it's not any good. And so again, Binder thought that Fenton would actually be kind of a good manager. And so even though he was a scientist and he was doing something different, that he could take over this marketing. And what he needed to do is to develop a smooth running organization. And then what he said is like, oh, you can go back to operations later. I think people always say this, but that's kind of never going to happen. And he sold it as being a fun and a kind of a learning opportunity for him. Okay. And so what he did, so this is the picture that is in there. So let's see, what did I say here? So it was fun. And then this idea here that managing is managing. And so whether you're managing science or you're managing a marketing department, that's kind of all the same thing. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, but that's there. Again, a good manager, although, it's hard to get a job without it, but, when you're inside, so Dennis had kind of proved his management style and stuff like that while he's there. And a good manager doesn't necessarily need a degree in management. Again, Dennis's was in microbiology, but what he did is he wanted to use a kind of scientific approach. And so when he went to marketing, he spoke a lot with his staff. And again, Binder gave him a compliment saying that, what he did that was really good is that he listened more than he talked. So he went in there and said, how's it going? What are you doing? He took a kind of a lay of the land. And when you look at marketing for a pharmaceutical product, it's a little bit different because you're not going out directly to the customers. You're actually going out to physicians. And a lot of physicians actually don't really like a slick sales pitch. And then, and also, one of the things that the physicians are very smart, but they don't have a lot of time to do things like read medical journals. And so you need to go in there and you need to convince them on the science on that. So trouble is, a lot of your salespeople don't have MDs or PhDs, and sometimes, so they're a little bit more salesmen. Again, Binder thought of them as a little bit more kind of like educators, and what your sales force was there to do is to teach the healthcare professionals how to use a company's medication efficiently and kind of what that medicine was good for. And so what Amgen did, so at this time, Amgen had actually two products, Epogen and Neupogen. Basically for red blood cells, and they weren't kind of selling that much of it. And but trouble is, these are pretty complicated drugs. They're hormones that are given to people. And again, while they do really good for the diseases that they want, you really got to show the science behind it of what's going on there. And what they were seeing is that you had a sales force that didn't necessarily know what your product is. And so they thought one of the problems that we're having is for that. How they get around that is Dennis proposed dividing the sales force so that each can focus in on one product. So you have a salesman who does one product. Industry standard at that time was roughly about 3 to 4 products per person. And again, he was told it was a bad idea, that it's no fun just to focus in on one product, and that the salesman wouldn't go for it. There'd be a revolt. And so the idea was he proposed kind of doing an experiment. And what Fenton's experiment, the results kind of surprised them. And so what they saw is that when they focused in on one drug, they were a little bit more effective. And this led to a reconfiguration of their national sales force. And so again, Gordon Binder recommended, you know what? So he's a businessman, and he really is a business and a finance man. He's not necessarily a scientist, although he does manage scientists, and he ran one of the largest and a very prestigious scientific company for a long time. And so what Gordon Binder stated is that while it's not a clinical trial in a sense of business, but why shouldn't we use kind of this business? Why shouldn't we use data to drive our decisions? And again, in his talking to his scientists and sales force, one of the reasons why you do an experiment is to find the answer. If you already know the answer, then you don't need to do the experiment. And his scientists were kind of telling him this. And so this problem that they had is, will the sales force feel more comfortable, and be more productive representing one product rather than two? And so what they did is they actually did this. They took 2 groups. They randomly assigned the salesmen to it. They took groups that were in similar areas that had similar populations and stuff like that. And then they did it. And what they found out is, and in parts of the scientific process, there's steps to the scientific process. So if you look at it, you got to define your question and then hope you can answer it. You got to determine the particulars of the experiment. You got to do the experiment, and then you got to kind of measure your results. And so they did this, and they were looking at the sales force. They had them rate their satisfaction. They were more satisfied. They compared actual sales to the sales previous of both the students in the area, not the students, but the sales force in the areas. They also looked at quotas. For me, I'm a scientist in business, and quotas are these things where you're kind of looking up kind of what was your historical performance and stuff like that. What's the market potential and kind of things like that. And there's a lot that goes into kind of setting up what a quota is. But the problem that we have on this here drug, on these are new drugs that we haven't seen before. There's a whole class of new drugs, right? And so we were talking about, these are the first drugs that were developed. They were hormones, they were cloned individuals, kind of that wasn't out there, so we didn't know. So part of this is they set this up. Second thing that Gordon Binder said is that, the actual using the scientific approach is kind of actually they think it fosters free thinking. And so when people have a gut idea, it becomes their theory, their target, right? So Bob wants to do it this way. This is Bob's idea, and Bob really is critical on it. So if you look at data, what happens is it kind of takes the personality out of it. And so you're not evaluating the person, you're evaluating the ID. And again, we kind of see that all the time. And recently, recently with the COVID pandemic, we kind of see that, where, and a lot of times in business, you have people, they want to follow their gut feeling. I'm the boss, and you got to follow this gut feeling. And basically, that's not kind of the best way to do it. So again, Dennis Fenton points out that failed ideas are a way to make things better by doing failure analysis. And we'll talk about that a little bit in class, but you kind of have these ideas and all this. There's a big sense now of that you do something, you fail early, but you need to learn from it. You really kind of need to look at your mistakes. You don't just fire. So that was your idea. That was a bad idea. I fire you, let's go on to the next great idea. And so the idea is, in a scientific approach, what you do is you take your failures and you need to learn from those particular failures. Again, Amgen was a little bit different company in that the science was driven from kind of the top down. Historically in pharma, what you do is you would take a desirable patient population and then you would identify the cure for it. What Amgen did was a little bit different, and a number of companies, Genentech and Biogen did this as well, is that basically they had a process and they wanted to go to where kind of the science led them. And so they have a tool and a technique. And just like we talked about in the Ayali book, you have a tool and a technique. And then with the tool and technique, you can do a whole bunch of different things. If you bet all your stuff on one product, if you have one product and, if that product doesn't work out, then you no longer have a company. If you have a company that has a set of tools and techniques, then that company could kind of switch on to the next better thing. Epogen, when it was first kind of put off as an idea, wasn't really that good of a drug. And the reason is because basically, what they thought of the patient body is that there was less than 100,000 people a year who could probably use Epogen. And these were people who are under end-stage kidney dialysis. These were people going kidney dialysis. They were kind of at the end of their life. They were looking for either a kidney or they're kind of going to die soon. Part of this is due to the destruction of the red blood cells. At this point, there was no treatment available. But when we look at drugs, the cost of discovering and making a drug and getting it through the regulatory process is really big. Jonathan, do you know about how much it costs? About what it would cost to bring a drug to market?
Oh, I forgot. I just remember that we will spend 10 to 15 years to develop the drug.
It may be 10 to 15 years. Yeah, and think about all the people who are on payroll for that 10 to 15 years.
I think.
So it's almost $1 billion.
$1 billion, yeah.
$1 billion. It's a couple hundred million, and it's almost $1 billion.
I remember that the clinical trial to spend a lot of money.
Yes, clinical trials spend a lot of money. Okay, and so again, in retrospect, this is a really genius idea because actually the number of patients on dialysis has quadrupled. Some of it may be because people live longer. I spelled salt wrong, but basically Epogen has also been used in things like cancer patients. And so when cancer patients get to treatment, they're actually, they start to get an anemia, and this would treat the anemia for that. And so while this drug doesn't cure cancer, it actually treats some of the side effects that our cancer drugs do have, and it makes life a little bit more bearable for individuals who are being cancer. But when we're looking at this, when we're looking at about 1983, one of the things that actually made this possible in order to get funders for this drug is something that we call the Orphan Drug Act. And so this is part of the regulation that we want to know about. And so in the Orphan Drug Act, this is Public Law 97-414 by Henry Waxman, Democrat out of California. And so, again, the company may have held him do this. What the Orphan Drug Act does is it gives holders of this 7 years of patent exclusivity to treat for low-level diseases. And so when you have a disease like this, is after you develop, from the day that's licensed, you have 7 years of exclusivity. And so even though there's only 100,000 patients in here, that actually gives you, no one else could kind of come in and make a generic drug for this for at least 7 years. And while an intellectual property, we're talking you have 20 years from your application filing. Just like you said, Jonathan, you have 10 years, 15 years that you're going to be doing the research that you're going to be applying. And so by the time you apply for the license and manufacture this drug and get it out, you maybe have 5 or 4 years before someone of exclusivity on it. And if definitely for these orphan drug acts, it makes it very, very difficult for that. So Amgen had basically, like I said before, a 4-pronged attack for managing their risk, right? So they didn't want to put all their eggs in kind of one basket and have a company. So George Rathman, what he did to take advantage of human cloning, what they did is they wanted to look at human healthcare. They wanted to look at human diagnostics. They wanted to look at animal healthcare. The idea was like, if I make a drug for an animal, I can get it out to market a lot faster because there's not as much regulation on that. And that's actually not the case. There's actually more on that. And then specialty chemicals. Can we make various chemicals that would be used? the board really wanted them to focus in on one thing. So again, we had companies, they were competing with companies like Genentech and Biogen IDEC that were, Genentech had insulin, and so they were really like, you need to kind of go on this one thing. They thought that Rathgen was doing is kind of an R&D boutique, so they were doing this good science and they were getting recognized for the good science, but it's like, where is that going to get us? And so what the trouble is here on these guys here is they don't know what the next big thing is. And what a lot of pharmacists do is they will take a patient population that may be already served and they'll say, hey, can we make a drug that's a little bit better and kind of get into this field and make a lot of money? And so what you have is you have a lot of people who are competing for the same thing. By what Amgen did is, it's like, we're not only going to look at drugs, we're going to look at everything. Right. So we're going to look at animal drugs. We're going to look at specialty chemicals and things like that in order to make them. And again, with the animal market, actually was really kind of interesting is that there was a lot more of human products that hit the market before the first animal products did. Because again, with animal products, you're not only looking at the FDA, but you're also looking at the Department of Agriculture too. So there's a little bit of more of a layer on there. Plus, you can't charge as much with animals. Again, chicken and pig hormones. They developed a hormone that would allow chickens to grow a little bit bigger. They developed a hormone that actually made pork a lot more leaner and stuff like that. And what was kind of funny is, and this one here, while there was a farmer testing this, he had a heart attack and died. And the National Enquirer, I couldn't find a picture of it. The National Enquirer took up the story and said that the genetically engineered chickens pecked farmer to death in his field. And so again, it was kind of just things are not there. And so even though this happens, is Amgen is not in their field. They got recognized. So Amgen actually were the ones who discovered a way for E. coli to produce indigo. And so this came out in Science. So it was recognized actually quite a bit. But trouble is, when you go into that field, what was really kind of interesting is there were three main consumers of indigo at the time. There was the United States, there was Europe, and there was Japan. And makers of indigo, which was a chemical processor they were isolating it from, they were actually getting $12 per pound, but it was only costing them $4 per pound. And so what they figured out is if they went into this, they had to basically make it for less than $4 a pound, which at this point they couldn't do that. And so they thought if they went into making indigo, these companies would basically just drop their prices and run them out. So they actually sold off these enzymes and detergents to actually Kodak, which is another special chemical. So Kodak, the film, and that's kind of another story. Abbott Laboratories funded the test kits, but that wasn't a lot of money. So that basically left human pharmacy. Erythropoietin wasn't happening. So they were having trouble cloning erythropoietin, but they really kind of hung on to it. What I said here is what was really kind of funny is Gordon Binder in his chapter 3 talks about how you need to use science in order to make your business decision. But in the end, it was actually that original CEO, Rathburn, who said, you know what, we're going to stick with erythropoietin and we're going to do it. And so his board and everyone else, and they weren't, erythropoietin would serve at this time 100,000 patients and stuff like that. But, he stuck to his guns and he kind of delivered that product. And so here's a picture of Gordon Binder here when he was a much kind of younger man and doing that. And he has his suits and stuff like that. So that's the story of kind of Amgen in the beginning part of Amgen. And so while Amgen does a lot of science, what they did is they got lucky and they had a product and they designed a sales force that were able to go out and kind of increase their product. And so we're talking about it now. Amgen is, as a company, it takes in about Amgen as a company takes in about $27 billion a year. And so they do make a lot of money out of this particular drug, and they're a successful company. And all that was due to developing these tools and techniques of molecular cloning. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, hold your thought. Where I want to get your thoughts is that if we go back and we go out and fill out this assignment. So if you go on to fill out this assignment, so after listening to the talk of the Gordon Binder book chapter, give your thoughts. What did you learn what did you learn that you think would tell others about this process? And oh, okay. So if you take this, so you can either type it or you can give video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and so give you student access. And so what you can do is submit the assignment. And then what you have here is under this assignment is you can go over here is you can leave me a video, record and leave a video up there. And so I would like you to kind of, rather than type this out, just verbally do it and give me a minute or two telling me kind of what you thought about this particular story that I told you about.
Okay.
I can't do that because my camera is taken up by the Zoom, so I can't do this one here, but I will. And I do need to give a lesson plan on how to do that. Okay. All right, that's my lecture for today. Do you have any thoughts or comments?
No, just think that the Gordon has very great management skills, and he's smart.
Yeah.
Originally, he kind of have a startup company. Right now, this company became kind of like an empire, I think, and have big sales. And also, I'm surprised at the person called Dennis Fenton.
Uh-huh.
He just kind of changed the career from the molecular biology career just to the marketing major, kind of like that.
Yeah. But it's kind of one of those things that, again, some of us are trained as scientists, but, if you can do that change, it can be fun and rewarding, and it can be very lucrative. I'm sure he made a lot more being the marketing and going on. And since then, he's started up a couple of companies and stuff like that. I'm sure he made a lot more money kind of doing that than just being a scientist. And so
I just got the information that the one product that Amgen made, they have the 25 years that what is called the patent exclusivity. They can just sell this one product. They make a lot of money. And I think I don't remember that the patent already expired, and the other companies can just make the similar product right now. But right now, the Amgen companies, they just developed the gene therapy product of the monoclonal drug. I forgot.
Yeah,
I forgot that.
So no, they're a good company. They're doing a lot of different things and stuff on there. But you're right.
Yeah.
I think the intellectual property allowed them to make a lot of money. They did define, and they did a lot of help. They saved a lot of people. But again, they were first doing that end stage dialysis patients. They expanded it, and that was genius, bringing it into cancer. Because so what happened is the treating cancer patients who have anemia, that's everyone who has cancer. So that rather than 100,000 people a year, you're talking millions of people a year. So that's a big one.
Yeah, the big market, the cancer therapy.
Yeah. Okay, Jonathan, this is the extent of kind of what I want to talk about. If you have any questions or anything else like that, or how's it going? How's your logo and everything else going? Are you able to do that pretty easily?
I'm still brainstorming.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right. So I will see you next Tuesday, and I will continue to kind of look online and look at kind of what your guys doing. And, again, if you're brainstorming, if you want to say, hey, Nick, what do you think about this? Go ahead and send me an email, and that would be fine. Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Ken.
All right. See you later.
See you.
Here, I need to get out of this. I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to end the meeting, and I get my next meeting. So see you later.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.